Madison. The phone cut through the rain like a slap. "Don't involve yourself," Jacob said, voice flat and distant. "You're just a passenger's garbage." Those words landed and stayed, sharp, final. And in that instant I understood. Everything had changed. Childhood lives like a film that gets brighter when you watch it from a place of hurt. The big white colonial on the quiet Boston street, bare feet on polished wood, my mother's lemon cake scent drifting through the house, laughter ricocheting from room to room. There was always motion, always noise. Amid it all, I felt tethered to Jacob, 2 years older, faster, bigger, the one who always seemed to be center stage. When he was busy being brilliant and adored, I thought it didn't matter. At night, when the house was quiet, we'd sneak into the kitchen for midnight snacks and whisper secrets. I never imagined there would be a day he'd want me gone. We spent afternoons on the living room rug building castles from blocks, racing toy cars in dizzy circles, taking turns feeding Buddy, our aging golden retriever. Mom and Dad worked long into nights at the law firm, but we had each other. I was the quiet dreamer with books piled high. Jacob was the star, high school sports, student government, friends clustering around him. Sometimes I wondered if he even noticed me. Still, I believed the line between us was unbreakable. Then life shifted. I left for college in California, chasing sun, freedom, a version of myself I hadn't met. Jacob stayed, Harvard, then the climb at a prestigious New York firm. Our paths diverged, but I kept thinking there was a thread that would pull us back together. So when Mom called one chilly October morning to say Jacob was getting married in New York, my chest filled with a strange, dizzy hope. I pictured us standing side by side in a grand cathedral, laughing about a childhood joke only we remembered. The bride's name didn't matter. He was my brother. Of course I'd be there. Wedding plans swallowed every family conversation. Cream envelopes, gold script, invitations sent across the country, even to relatives in Europe. I waited for mine. Days turned to weeks. Nothing. At first I told myself mail gets lost. Maybe it was a surprise. I checked the mailbox every morning with a ridiculous, stubborn hope. Slowly, that hope faded, replaced by a creeping, humiliating doubt. At work, friends asked if I was excited. I mumbled something about being busy. The truth, I didn't know anything. No call from family, no "will you come" from my parents. I buried myself in blue sky charters, the company I'd built, planes that took me from LA to London and back. But in quiet moments, I thumbed through old photos and wondered what I'd done to be excluded. One rainy Friday night, I couldn't stand the silence any longer. I dialed Jacob. My heart pounded so loud I could feel it in my throat. The phone rang 3 times, then he answered. "Hey, it's me." I tried to sound light. "When's the wedding?" There was a pause long enough to count. Then his voice, cold and clipped. "Not your concern." "Stay out of it, Matiso. You're just a passenger's garbage." For a second I couldn't breathe. Not because he yelled, but because of the finality in the words. All those shared birthdays, family dinners, the times I defended him when Mom was furious about grades or a broken window, they felt erased in an instant. I had become surplus. And the worst part, I had no idea why. After that, every memory felt laced with suspicion. I replayed small moments. Offhand comments, the way he'd cut me off at gatherings, the times he changed the subject when I mentioned work. Things that had once seemed harmless now looked like clues. Had something happened? A secret? A decision that left me out? Or had he simply chosen a life that didn't include me? I didn't make a scene. I called, I texted, I tried different ways to reach him. Mostly I got silence or short, cold replies. That silence gnawed at my confidence and my sense of worth. Meals alone, flights alone. The more I searched for answers, the more I noticed how often I'd stepped aside to let him shine. Now I wondered if I'd only ever been a supporting role, written out without warning. Then, one morning at the airport, watching strangers hug and families gather, something inside me hardened. I wouldn't stay quiet. I needed to know why Jacob could say those words, and why my memories suddenly felt like they belonged to someone else. Not for revenge, for clarity. to find out whether the line between us still existed or if someone had taken scissors to it. On that rainy night when his voice dropped each cold syllable into the line, I picked up the phone and breathed. I would find the truth, no matter how much it hurt. Memories can glow brighter in pain, but they can also reveal what needs fixing. What? My voice cracked, small, childlike. You heard me, Jacob repeated, sharp and merciless. Stay away. The line went dead before I could breathe another word. I stared at the phone, the screen glowing through a haze of tears I didn't even realize were falling. I don't cry easily, but that night I broke. It wasn't about missing some wedding. It was about being erased from my own family, about facing the brutal truth that Jacob didn't want me there, and maybe no one else did either. I thought about calling my parents, desperate for comfort, but I already knew their answers. Dad would dismiss me with a sigh, tell me not to take it personally. Mom would say it was for the best, that I'd drifted too far away, too lost in my jet-setting life to matter. It was easier for them if I stayed the distant daughter, head in the clouds, flying from city to city while the family carried on without me. That night, alone in my apartment high above Los Angeles, I let the city's lights blur beyond my window. For the first time in years, I thought of the girl I used to be, barefoot in that big Boston house, convinced that family was unshakable, that no matter how far I flew, I would always have a place. But people change. Love fades. Sometimes the ones who should hold you closest are the first to cut you loose. I went to bed with his words echoing like a curse. Just a passenger's garbage collector. They stung, not because they were true, but because he believed them, because my brother couldn't see the woman I had become, the one who built an empire in the sky, who learned to fly alone. Before sleep claimed me, I made a vow. His rejection would not define me. If I was nothing more than garbage in his story, then I would start writing my own. And maybe that was the night I began to understand that blood doesn't always make a family. Family is who stands with you, who believes in you when the world turns its back. I didn't know it yet, but being cast out of Jacob's wedding would ignite a change neither of us could escape. After that call, sleep never came. I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, replaying those words until they carved into me. There is a pain only family can inflict, a wound sharp enough to tear through everything you thought was real. I told myself it had to be a mistake, a bad day, some ridiculous misunderstanding. We fought before, but we were still family. Surely, if I explained, if I reached out, someone would pull us back together. So the next morning, with dark circles under my eyes and dread curdling in my stomach, I dialed my parents' number in Boston. The familiar ringtone made my heart lurch. I half expected Mom to pick up, but it was Dad who answered, voice rough as always. Hello? Hey, Dad, it's me, Madison. I forced steadiness, as if I hadn't cried all night. Liv, we were just talking about you. How's life in California? Distant clatter echoed behind him. Dishes. Or maybe Mom fussing in the kitchen. I swallowed hard. Can we talk for a second? It's about Jacob. My chest tightened on the words. He must have heard it too, because his sigh came heavy, the sigh he always used when drama approached. What about your brother? So I told him. Everything. The call, the words, the way it cut me. I didn't spare a detail. I even repeated the exact phrase, hoping he would hear how cruel it sounded. When I finished, silence filled the line. Then Dad laughed. Loud, careless, cruel. He's right, Madiso. You've always been more interested in picking up after others than doing anything real for yourself. The words hit harder than a slap. I froze, numb, my throat locked. I had called begging for warmth, just a shred of the home I remembered. Instead, I got laughter. Dismissal. Then another voice drifted through the speaker, faint but unmistakable. Mom. You know, not everyone is meant for the big leagues. Did you buy a lottery ticket? My stomach clenched, but I forced my voice steady. 2 every week. Same numbers. 28 years. Natalie stared at the slip of paper like it might detonate in her hands. Maggie, Do you even know last night's winning numbers? Before I could answer, she was already clawing for her phone, fingers flying across the screen. Her voice pitched high, trembling with disbelief. Oh my God! Oh my God! Kevin! The scream dragged Kevin in from the garage, still wearing his work gloves, eyes wide. What happened? Who's hurt? The ticket! Natalie shoved it at him, hands shaking. Look at it! Look at last night's draw. Kevin's frown deepened as he compared the numbers on the slip to the glowing screen in Natalie's hand. The kitchen fell into a taut silence, stretching thinner and thinner like a rubber band ready to snap. Finally, he looked up, his face unreadable. Mom, do you understand what this means? I understood perfectly. The only question was, did they? The next 2 hours unraveled like chaos on fast forward. I sat at the kitchen table, watching as though it were someone else's life being rewritten. Natalie paced in circles, phone pressed tight to her ear, voice bursting with manic energy. 75 million. Yes, million. We won. We won. That word caught in my ears like a thorn. Kevin hovered under the overhead light, studying the ticket as though it were a diamond. It's real, he kept muttering, dazed. 75 million. It's actually real. Natalie hung up one call only to start another, her marketing brain already spinning. We need a financial advisor, a tax attorney. Kevin, cancel your meetings. The process is complicated. Deadlines are tight. This changes everything. Everything. For whom? I wondered. Kevin turned to me, eyes lit with feverish calculation. Mom, this is life-changing. We need to decide how to handle it. There it was again. We. Decisions? I asked carefully. Natalie's tone shifted into that polished edge she saved for stubborn clients. The media will swarm. Winners get harassed. You'll need management, protection. Someone to handle all the complications. Complications of my own money, I thought. Kevin added, almost eagerly, and living arrangements. Forget the assisted living facilities we discussed. With this kind of money, we could find luxury options, golf courses, spas. Still plotting my exile, just gilding it in gold. Natalie's eyes gleamed with sudden inspiration. Or better, a bigger house, with a full in-law suite for you, Mom. Separate, but connected. Privacy for everyone. A bigger house. Theirs. And me tucked neatly inside, dependent. The more things changed, the more they stayed the same. I leaned forward, my voice quiet, but cutting. There's one small detail we should discuss. Both of them froze, staring at me with that thin impatience people reserve for children interrupting grown-up talk. The ticket is in my name. The silence that followed was not celebratory. It was horrified. What do you mean? Kevin's voice was tight, careful. I extended my hand. After a long pause, he placed the ticket into my palm. I closed my fingers around it steady. I mean, I bought this, with my money, from my purse. The same numbers I've played for 28 years, which makes it mine. Natalie's face flushed and paled, shifting through colors like a warning light. But you live here. We're family. That money changes everything. For all of us, no. I stood, straighter than I had in years, my dignity burning through every word. It changes everything for me. The dawning horror on their faces, that was the moment I knew I'd carry like a jewel. The day they realized their garage tenant, their near nursing home burden, their monthly rent payer, had just become untouchably, independently wealthy. If they thought they could shut me out, they had no idea who I really was. If they didn't want me at their table, I would build my own, bigger, stronger, and I would fill it with people who saw me, who valued me, who understood that sometimes the quiet ones grow wings and rise higher than anyone dares to imagine. And with one single call, I severed the last thread tying me to the family I was born into. That was the day I stopped begging for scraps of their approval and started claiming the life I had already built with my own hands. The truth? I never needed them. For years, while they laughed at me from Boston, dismissing me as nothing more than the trash picker of other people's lives, I was quietly building an empire they couldn't even fathom. It began when I was 26, standing at the edge of a dusty airstrip in Santa Monica, watching a battered Learjet roar into the California sky. I had always loved planes. As a girl, I'd press my forehead to the window pane, tracing contrails across the clouds and imagining the worlds beyond. Paris, Rome, New York, anywhere but here. Flying wasn't just fascination, it was escape. That spark became fire. My first paycheck went to flying lessons. Then came sleepless nights in cramped cockpits, scraping hours together. Luck and grit turned into my first jet, a half-broken Cessna that everyone told me was worthless. But it wasn't worthless to me. That Cessna was the foundation. From it, Blue Sky Charters was born. I scrubbed the cabin myself, booked clients, even flew trips I couldn't afford to hire pilots for. Every cent went back into the company. Word spread. First, it was tech entrepreneurs bouncing between Silicon Valley and Seattle. Then, celebrities from LA to Miami. Then, CEOs whispering my company's name in private lounges from London to New York. What I built wasn't just convenience. It was power, discretion, luxury, wrapped in silence. And one day, I looked up and realized those 10 gleaming jets, worth millions each, belonged to me. My business, my rules, my secret. I never told my family. Not once. Why would I? I didn't need my father's nod or my mother's applause, and I refused to give Jacob the satisfaction of parading me as his successful sister. Blue Sky was mine alone, and I guarded it with the ferocity of someone who had once been invisible. What I never expected was love. It crept in quietly, like turbulence you don't see until you're already shaking. His name was Daniel, one of my pilots. Not a billionaire, not a headline client, but steady, calm, with rough hands that could coax life back into any broken engine. The first time I noticed him was during a maintenance check in Denver. I was elbow deep in grease, hair tied back, trying to replace a faulty part. Most men flinched at the sight of me working like a mechanic. Not Daniel. He handed me the wrench I needed without a word, then started talking about the mountains of Colorado and how they made him fall in love with flying. It didn't happen fast. It was months of late-night hangar talks. Confessions I'd never dared voice before, about feeling erased in my own family, about building something just to prove I could. He listened, always. No judgment, no pity, just quiet strength. And one evening, after paperwork and flight logs blurred together, he kissed me. No fireworks, no spectacle. Just the kind of kiss that felt inevitable, like breathing after drowning. We kept it simple. No fairy tales, no promises carved in stone. Just two people who had finally found someone who understood the weight of silence and the power of breaking free from it. Daniel moved in, and for a while it felt almost too perfect. Flights across oceans, late dinners under city lights, walks through Griffith Park where we whispered about futures that seemed untouchable. He never once glanced at my bank accounts or the empire I'd built. He wanted me. Just Meriso, not the jet owner, not the family outcast. A year later, we made a decision that should have been ours alone. No spectacle, no headlines, no flashing bulbs. Just vows whispered in Aspen, Colorado, while the mountains still carried winter's snow. A wooden lodge, a handful of friends, mostly pilots and crew. My dress was plain, his suit sharp, our words simple. Honesty, patience, and the promise to anchor one another even when life carried us 30,000 feet above the ground. But privacy, I would learn, is fragile. Somehow, whether from a nosy guest, a careless whisper, or sheer bad luck, our secret cracked open. Days later, the world knew. Photos leaked online. Articles spread like wildfire. Secret millionaire's wedding in Aspen. Private jet queen marries pilot beau. My name, hidden for years, suddenly filled headlines from Los Angeles to London. At first, shame burned hotter than pride. I had built an empire by living in shadows, and now the spotlight pinned me down. Reporters called, strangers begged for interviews, celebrities fought to book my jets. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. And then, the voices I never expected. My family, the ones who had left me behind. Cousins I hadn't heard from in years suddenly wanted to reconnect. My parents' voices, hesitant, almost pleading. Madison, sweetheart, we had no idea. Call us even Jacob, the brother who once sneered that I was nothing but a garbage collector for passengers, called and called again. His first message was stiff, formal. I saw the news. Call me by the third. Desperation cracked his voice. Ollie, please, I'm sorry. I want to hear your story. It was surreal, a lifetime of silence, of rejection, shattered overnight. Relatives from Chicago, New Jersey, even Europe, names I barely remembered, suddenly claimed they had always cared. My inbox, my voicemails, my entire life was flooded. And as I stood there, phone glowing with 500 missed calls, I realized the universe wasn't just surprising me, it was testing me. For years, I had begged for their approval. Now, they begged for me. They didn't just want to talk, they wanted pieces of me. Can we visit your house in Los Angeles? Any chance I could ride one of your jets? Matiso, you're incredible. Why didn't you ever tell us? The flood of voices clawed at my phone like vultures circling fresh prey. Overnight, the very people who once dismissed me as nothing suddenly decided I was worth chasing. I stared at the endless wall of notifications, fury and bitter amusement twisting together in my chest. Family ties run deep, yes, but so do scars. And all I could hear, over and over, was Jacob's cutting voice, my father's careless laugh, my mother's constant reminders that I'd never measure up. That past came roaring back, louder than their sudden admiration. The calls never stopped, 5, 10, 20 in a row, each one a cruel reminder of the years I had begged them to see me. Not for my money, not for my business, just for me. But now that I had something they wanted, I wasn't a disappointment anymore. I was their golden ticket. Daniel stood in the kitchen, brewing coffee, flipping pancakes, humming an old Beatles tune like nothing outside mattered. And for the first time, I realized he was right. It didn't. He didn't ask me what I planned to say. He didn't pressure me. He simply gave me space to breathe, to exist without performance. The truth? I had no desire to call anyone back. I knew the moment I answered, the conversations would turn transactional. They'd want to pry into my empire, test my loyalty with favors, demand their slice of a life they never helped build. I could already hear their schemes. Can you fly us to Paris? Do you know any celebrities? Maybe you could invest in my new idea? Number. I was done being a passenger in their story. For too long, their opinions dictated the course of my life. But now, I had everything. My business, my partner, my chosen family. The ones who cheered my victories, who stood by me through failures, the ones who earned a seat at my table. The people who once mocked me had forfeited their ticket long ago. So, I let the phone ring, and ring, and ring. I watched the desperation pile up, listened to the regret dripping through their voicemails, but I never picked up. That weekend, I walked the hills of Los Angeles with Daniel, talking about our future, about blue skies next routes, about starting a family of our own. The past felt distant, like a bad dream I no longer needed to relive. Maybe, if I had answered, there would have been apologies. Or maybe the same cruel laughter recycled under a new disguise. Either way, I knew better now. I wasn't theirs to mock, or to claim. I had finally broken free. The headlines moved on, as they always do. The world found another story to devour, and my phone finally fell silent. A cousin here, an old friend there. They tested the waters, but I answered only when I wanted to. Up in the sky, with America and Europe sliding beneath my wings, I found peace. Family wasn't blood. It wasn't duty. It was the crew that stood beside me, day after day, building something impossible. It was Daniel who loved me as Matiso, not the jet owner, not the prodigal daughter, just me. And maybe, in the strangest twist of all, even Buddy, my dog, had it right from the beginning. He never cared about headlines or money or the weight of betrayal. All he wanted was to curl beside me, steady and loyal as the world tried to tear me apart. If I strip everything down, the rejection, the sharp sting of their laughter, the silence that followed, I wouldn't erase any of it, not a single cut, because each wound carved a path here to a life I built brick by brick, fire by fire. They once mocked me as nothing more than a passenger's garbage collector, but that insult became my anthem. They thought I was carrying scraps, when in truth I was carrying fragments of freedom, pieces of a future no one could steal from me. The truth hit like lightning. I was never collecting garbage. I was collecting power, resilience, and the courage to walk away. Their laughter, once poison, became my sharpest weapon. Now the sky is mine. Wide, merciless, endless, and I fly it on my terms. No family approval, no borrowed pride, just me, my story, and a horizon they'll never touch.